you tell us a little bit about your story, about how did you get here with your magic?
So thinking about this, since you actually asked about it the other day, I was thinking about, what was the first thing that I ran across that I could probably consider pagan? And I thought back in elementary, back in Okinawa, Japan, I ran across a book called Black Magic, White Magic, which absolutely fascinated me. Matter of fact, I found out later that they pulled it off the shelf because it was not appropriate for those age groups. And that really got me down the path, and it's just something that I stuck with from that point in time on.
And how would you identify yourself today?
Very eclectic. So I have studied shamanism, I have studied necromancy, I have studied currently pop culture magic. So I've got a lot of different influences in my path, and it's honestly coming together very nicely into almost like my own tradition.
So in this new age of magic, we see a lot of new traditions. So what would you call this? As it's starting to form, do you have a working name for it?
I do not have a working name for it right now. It's just this conglomeration of thoughts and ideas that I've been having.
And what are those thoughts and ideas about? Is there a central theme to it?
Yes and no. It's really old and new coming together. I was doing studies on pop culture magic and shamanism, and I don't want to say I had a vision, but it's almost like the Egyptian deities talked to me, and they started showing me how these things come together and how almost like they requested for me to help bring them into the modern age, modernize them, if you will. And I've been working towards that task. And it's something that I'm hoping to eventually get together to share with others when I finally have a cohesive plan.
I always believe in progress over perfection. So when you talk about pop culture, are you talking about like cartoons? Are you talking about comics? Are you talking about movies? I mean, as I know, there's a lot of, pop culture is becoming really important to the pagan community.
And the answer to that is yes, all the above. Pop culture has been a huge influence for me because I'm a huge gamer. I play Dungeons & Dragons, I read comics, of course I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and for a long time I kept that separate from my religion until I had the gods spoke through my wargaming, if you will. I kept running across the number 13, and I'm like, what am I supposed to learn from this? And the only association I had with at that time was one of my tabletop games, one of the races, and it ended up turning out that the gods were going, look, you've separated your life into all these multiple pieces, and you're not bringing them together, you're not being a cohesive person, you're not letting these things touch. And I was like, wow, I should really start paying attention, not just simply in my practices, in my faith, but through every aspect of my life.
And so one of the things I've seen about that, so was Dungeons & Dragons a gateway for you into this? Or you mentioned the book as being much more of an influence.
Yes and no. I mean, because of my vast fascination with fantasy and all that, when I come across something in a book that's a fantasy book and it's like, the mage studied this way to learn this practice, I start wondering, can I do that in a more realistic sense? And a lot of times I've tried those practices. Matter of fact, when I do a lot of my energy working classes, my more advanced energy working techniques are from fantasy books that I tried out the techniques and they actually work. So always be open-minded about these things.
And so let's go ahead and take it. So now today you are, they call it NEFLPLC. It's a Northeast
Florida Pagan Leadership Coalition.
Here's another set of words I butchered. And what's your involvement with that?
I am the president of the Northeast Florida Pagan Leadership Coalition. I'm actually one of the original organizers for the group.
And so beyond that, do you also have a group here? Do you have a group of your own here?
Yes, I actually, you'll meet one of our other coordinators for that as well later on, but I am also the Minister for Sanctuary Realms of Spiritual Growth, which is the local group that I help out with.
And does that do rituals? Does that do training?
Absolutely. We try to, it's an open group, so anybody can come out. We do rituals for different traditions. Not only do the organizers for that group do the rituals, but we also have our doors open that other people, if they're interested to do rituals, can. We do discussion groups every second Friday of the month, and those vary vastly. Sometimes it's creation myths all the way up to energy working practices. So it's always fun for people to come out.
It sounds like it. So let me ask a pop culture quiz. Is that I've heard that you're very much that you enjoy the Jedi.
Yep.
Can you explain? So the Jedi, for anyone who hasn't been out there, Jedi has become really, in the UK, has been seen as, it's emerging as its own, I would call it philosophy versus religion.
Yes. I actually am trying to finish my year's study of Jediism. I started it last year, and unfortunately life got busy and I didn't finish it. I'm actually taking an online course right now for Jediism, which has been very interesting. But a lot of times when you hear people talk about it, they talk about the philosophy of Jediism. It is the practices that they believe the Jedi did that we can apply to our modern day lives. So self-improvement, exercise, proper diet, working in the community, all these things are practices that people have been putting forward as being part of Jediism.
And so you can incorporate that into your normal practices.
Absolutely.
It's very interesting because one of the founders of paganism, Oberon Zell, started with Strangers in a Strange Land. Church of All Worlds comes out of that. So pop culture has been a big influence about paganism. Is there anywhere else that you see pop culture affecting the pagan front?
Actually, I've seen it all over. I've done 2 classes on pop culture and magic right now, maybe 3. And it's, in all honesty, been really well received. And it's interesting because when you do a class like that, you have to see what that group of people consider pop culture, what their interests are. And then you get to expand upon how they can use it in their magical practices. For me, being a gamer and big into Dungeons and Dragons, that's usually what I talk about, but I had a group that was really big into Star Trek, and talking about the different captains and what they represent and what they can represent in your magic. It was really fascinating to do that. If you're really interested in the topic and want to learn more, Taylor Elwood writes some really, really good books on the topic.
Terrific. And so one last thing. So this is going to be part of a year-long process. What does 2020 look like for you personally? What are you hoping to get out of this year?
I am honestly hoping to finish up my year's worth of Jediism practice. I really want to start getting my path working more cohesive and together, and definitely work towards more community work. It's always been something that I'm very big with. Of course, I help run Northeast Florida Pagan Leadership Coalition, which does a great deal of community work. But I definitely want to see us get out there a little bit more and do a little bit more in the community.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.